Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, lovers and seekers, those who are lost and those who are found. Tonight, I will be reading from the compilation titled, Outlaw Creative, The Geometry of Life. Our topic this evening, the hinge. Let's begin. The hinge, the small, stubborn piece the world forgets. The hinge sounds grand. It isn't. It is the least glamorous part of a door. The knob gets the hand. The door gets the paint. The frame gets the measurements. The hinge gets 3 screws and no fucking praise. But the hinge is the thing that quietly holds the geometry together. Without it, a door is just a board leaning against a hole in the wall, pretending it has a purpose. The hinge is the small, stubborn piece that lets something move while still staying attached to what grounds it. That's the baseline definition. A hinge is an axis of rotation, a connector between two worlds, a tiny mechanism on which something far larger can swing from closed to open, from open to closed. In human terms, the hinge is whatever small, easily overlooked point carries disproportionate weight in a life, a day, a promise, a story. Axis and swing. A hinge has 3 basic elements: the fixed side, fastened to the frame; the part that does not travel; the reference point; the moving side, fastened to the door; the part that swings, feels the weather, takes the kicks; the pin, the axis itself. The pin is what both shares and separates. It lets the door move while the frame stays, and it lets the frame hold while the door moves. Translate that out of hardware. The fixed side is what a person calls non-negotiable. The moving side is what a person calls my life. The pin is the decision, vow, or faith that binds them. Remove the fixed side, the hinge tears out. Remove the moving side, the hinge is just metal on wood, going nowhere. Remove the pin, everything falls in 2 directions at once. So the hinge in a life is the point where what is claimed to be non-negotiable meets what is actually lived, and there is enough structure there that something can move without everything collapsing. Hinge moments. People like to talk about turning points. That's hinge language spoken in cinematic scale. In reality, hinge moments are usually smaller than the soundtrack suggests. A hinge moment looks like a decision to tell the truth when a lie would be easier and safer, a choice to walk back into a room after conflict instead of disappearing, a small silent prayer said honestly instead of a large public performance, a phone call actually made instead of endlessly rehearsed. From the outside, it is barely anything. From the inside, the whole weight of past and future loads onto that one plain, unremarkable moment and asks, will this door open? Will it stay shut? Will it rip off the frame entirely? On the hinge, the ratio is brutal, tiny visible action, enormous invisible consequence. A hinge is the place where continuity meets risk. It allows a person to move into new space without losing attachment to what they have decided to be true, right, or sacred. Moral hinges. Every ethic, honest or dishonest, has hinges. An honest moral hinge says, I will not cross this line, even if I am tired, humiliated, afraid, or unsupervised. A dishonest moral hinge says, I will not cross this line unless it is emotionally inconvenient not to. Same sentence, different pin. Moral hinges are usually built out of promises to a person, to oneself, to God, to the dead. Habits, small repeated acts that thicken the wood around the screws. Reverence, not the showy kind, but the quiet knowledge, if I break this, something important in me will not come back. When moral hinges are strong, a person can be put under pressure, provoked, tempted, or exhausted, and the door will flex but remain on its axis. The stance holds. When moral hinges are rotten, everything is negotiable. Every vow is provisional, and the door swings wild in every draft. It might look like freedom, but it's just hardware failure. The hinge of time. Time has hinges too. Not every day is equally weighted. Not every hour sits flat on the same plane. There are days where everything that came before feels like the before, and everything that comes after will quietly be after, even if no one writes it down. Most of the time, a person does not recognize those days in the moment. They are ordinary in the way metal is ordinary. Two kinds of time hinges matter. Event hinges. Something happens: illness, betrayal, birth, loss, a letter, a phone call, an accident, a diagnosis, a miracle. After that, the road bends. The hinge was not asked for, it arrived. Response hinges. Something is done in response, a decision to repent, to forgive, to cut ties, to stay, to return, to seek help, to tell the story, to finally stop lying. This hinge is chosen, even if the options are terrible. The event hinge is what happens to someone. The response hinge is what happens in them. The shape of a life is mostly drawn by the second. The first may be unavoidable. The second is where the door actually swings. Broken hinges and stuck doors. Doors can fail two ways. They fall off or they freeze. A fallen door is obvious. The frame is torn, the board is on the floor, the wind is coming in. That's the dramatic collapse, the affair, the relapse, the explosion, the severed relationship, the meltdown on camera. A frozen door is quieter. It still hangs there, but it takes force to move. It screams when it does. Everyone starts avoiding it because it's a hassle. In a person, frozen hinges look like the conversation that never happens, the apology that is always almost made, the decision that sits in the same "I'll get to it" corner for 10 years, the creative work that is always in notes, never in done. The trouble with stuck hinges is that people start to believe the door itself is impossible to move, when really it is the rusted mechanics that need attention. Rust on hinges is fear, shame, resentment, and untreated grief. It's the mineral buildup of unspoken things. The longer it sits, the more the door creaks, and the more everyone pretends this is just how it is. Then one day, it either tears off or gets nailed shut. Maintaining the hinge. If a hinge is this important, then maintenance stops being cosmetic and becomes spiritual discipline. What does hinge maintenance look like? Truth-telling. Saying what is actually the case, even if it is small: I am tired, I am afraid, I am angry, I am lonely. These are not grand confessions, but they keep the screws from loosening in the dark. Small, repeated rituals. Daily acts that realign the door with the frame. A short prayer, a brief review of the day, a moment of silence before speaking, a note written rather than swallowed. Repair instead of replacement. The modern instinct is to replace the door. New job, new town, new partner, new project. But if the hinge is the problem, the new door will sag on the same axis. Maintenance means, first, what is my hinge made of? Where is it corroded? Witness. Hinges carry weight better when someone else has seen where they are, not to manage the door, but to know the stress points. A friend, a therapist, a mentor, an ancestor in whose shadow one stands. All of these can serve as quiet inspectors of the hardware. Periodic tightening. Every so often, a person has to revisit the non-negotiables and confirm they are still real, not slogans. Is this vow alive? Or is it just printed on the wall? That tightening is rarely comfortable, but it keeps the hinge from wobbling into hypocrisy. The cosmic hinge. Push the metaphor up a level. Every worldview has a cosmic hinge, the axis on which everything supposedly turns. For some, it is blind chance. For others, it is power. For others, it is love. For others, it is judgment. For others, it is the difference between being good and not. The cosmic hinge is whatever a person believes ultimately holds and turns reality itself. They may not be able to articulate it in a creed, but it will show in where they place their final obedience. If the cosmic hinge is power, then the frame of the universe is gain and loss, and every door is evaluated by whether it opens onto more leverage. If the cosmic hinge is love, then the frame of the universe is relation, and every door is tested by whether it opens onto deeper fidelity, mercy, and truth. What someone calls God, fate, the universe, or nothing is, in practice, a statement about the hinge they trust most, the pin they believe will not snap even when everything else does. That hinge can be misnamed, of course, or misperceived. But there will be one. Even nothing matters is a hinge, and a cruel one. It fastens a life to emptiness and then wonders why the rooms feel cold. The hinge is judgment. A courtroom hands down verdicts, but judgment often happens earlier, quieter at the hinge. The real judgment is not just the sentence, it is the chosen axis of the heart. The moment a person says internally, "This is the weight I will live under. These are the people I will consider real. This is the standard that will count." Hinges judge because they sort. This matters, this doesn't. This is sacred, this is optional. This is mine to carry, this I will drop. People like to imagine final judgment as a set of external scores kept by a cosmic auditor. It may be more accurate and more frightening to imagine it as a revelation of all the hinges one has actually installed and trusted. A life laid open as a diagram of pins and plates, some shiny with use, some rusted, some never attached to anything real. In that sense, repentance is not primarily a feeling, it is hinge work. It is pulling out a bent pin, acknowledging the damage around the holes, and setting a new axis, often at a cost. The hinge of speech. Words, too, have hinges. There are throwaway lines that mean nothing. Then there are sentences that quietly swing a life out of one geometry into another. "I'm sorry. I forgive you. I was wrong. I can't do this alone. I love you. I'm done. Help." These are hinge sentences. They are small, but they change which side of the wall a person stands on. They move someone from hiding into exposure, from isolation into relation, from illusion into clarity. Because of that, people often stall at the hinge of speech. They circle the sentence for months or years. They have the door, they have the frame, they even know the right pin, they just refuse to install it. So life knocks, time pushes, suffering leans. The hardware still sits on the counter, finding one's hinges. How does it function? Is really also where is it in me? A person can identify their hinges by paying attention to what decisions keep recurring at the same fault line, which small acts leave disproportionate echoes of relief or regret, which sentences felt tiny in the moment but rearranged the room afterward, where anxiety spikes even when the stakes look, on paper, small. Hinges are where fear gathers. Not because they are wrong, but because they are crucial. The work is not to remove the hinge and become fearless. The work is to name where the fear has gathered, inspect the hardware, and decide which doors will stay installed and which will be sealed. There is a strange peace that can come when a person finally accepts, "I do not have to manage the whole house. I have to care for my hinges," watching the door swing. In the end, the hinge is just this, a small, unfamous point of connection where something rooted meets something moving, and both are allowed to stay themselves while still staying in relation. The hinge is how a life opens without breaking the frame. The hinge is how a life closes without abandoning the wall. The hinge is how a person moves without ceasing to belong to what they call true. Every day, most of the important work happens there, at the little pin under chipped paint, muscles of metal holding quiet tension, waiting for the next knock, the next push, the next hand on the knob. That is what the hinge is. That is how it functions. And the rest of the story is simply this: what doors are built upon it, and which way they choose to swing.